If nothing is done, the spent fuel rod pools, the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant will go up in smoke and spread radiation throughout Ukraine, Russia, and Europe, mainly back to Europe. My friends, I said if nothing is done, if all things stay the same, I've had people comment, oh, nothing's going to happen. Oh, yeah, something will happen if nothing is done. Proactive measures must be taken to get cooling water to those cooling pools to replenish the big cooling pond. And that's not happened yet. You're in a war zone, and it might not happen. To further complicate the picture, Ukraine is saying that Russia is mining the cooling pools and mine the plants and is planning to destroy it. And Russia's countercharged that they've done no such thing, that in fact, Ukraine is planning to do this to try to throw the meeting, NATO meeting in Vilnius, Lithuania, which occurs the 11th through the 12th, over where they will take Ukraine into NATO. My friends, also, if this stuff spreads, Senators Lindsey Graham and Richard Blumenthal have declared that that would invoke Article 5 of the NATO Treaty. Now, what do they have to do that? Normally nothing, but they are trying to get some legislation through the Senate and the House in order to make this some kind of reality, to make it binding in some fashion. But guys, I got to tell you what, we are in for some times that are a little bit too interesting. So I'm going to show you exactly what the problems with these fuel rods are. I'm going to show you the fuel rods. I'm going to show you the test results from the Sandia National Laboratories, the photographs of these things burning up on contact with air. So I'm tired of hearing people say, oh, this won't happen. It can happen, and if something's not done, it's going to happen in some fashion. And this could get us into World War III. Guys, we may be on the precipice. Now, there's enough water on those cooling poles, they said, allegedly, to last for 2 months after the river went down, when the dam was on the Kharkova Dam. And some people think that because those reactors are so hot and because the fuel rods are so hot, apparently Unit 4 didn't get shut down as fast as the other ones did. It was a little bit later getting shut down. It's a little bit hotter. It's going to take more cooling water. So there might not be 2 months. That's one another video. I called it a ticking time bomb. Somebody said it's not a ticking time bomb. Well, I'm using an analogy for those that can't gather that. Anyway, let's go into. I'm going to show you some charts. We're going to get straight to it, guys. So there's no questions about what I'm talking about. At the end, I'm going to show you the effects of radiation. All right, guys, here we are. Zaporizhzhia Nuclear Power Plant in the crosshairs. Definitely, if something that's not done, we're going to have an issue here. And because it is a war zone, it may be difficult for the people to take the right steps, whether it's either the Russians or the Ukrainians. Somebody has got to make sure the cooling water stays there. And it's in the interest of both sides, or it should be, to do that. But they're each making allegations. This is the big cooling reservoir. This is where they get the water from. The actual cooling ponds are over here. These are the 6 reactors right here. I'm going to show you this in a close-up in a little bit. But all this water on the outside is gone now. This is the water that replenishes this water. This is the water that gives them the 2-month window. And this is the dike that holds it. Well, this dike could also fail because it don't have the pressure behind it now that it once had with this reservoir here, which is drained. Now, there is a channel of water right about here that you could run additional pipes and plumbing, and maybe even use trackers, the PTOs, to pump the water to get enough up here to meet the needs of this plant. So we're going to go into that, guys. But here's the actual cooling towers here on this side. So all this stuff is in high contention right now. Let's go forward and talk about this contention. See, Ukraine right now is holding drills, nuclear emergency preparedness drills. They've gave out the potassium iodine tablets, and they are claiming that this stuff can happen, and they're blaming Russia. Budanov. Now, this is the guy who is the head of the Ukrainian military intelligence. He said that the Russian troops had rigged the station's cooling ponds with explosives. And he said if they destroyed, they could lead to reactors melting down. Well, I'm more concerned about those spent fuel rods. So obviously, Budanov is not an engineer, as I am. He also said that Russia has moved explosive-laden vehicles into 4 of the plant's 6 power units. Now, is he correct? Well, we'll want to talk about that some more. Anyway, Ukrainian officials have warned that the fear of Kremlin might blow up the plant in the event Ukraine achieves a major breakthrough with its counteroffensive. So they're claiming if they make a major breakthrough, that Russia would do this. And why would Russia do that? Well, the Ukrainians think that it would be to delay them by suddenly having to evacuate something like 138,000 people in the area and putting radiation in the area that they wanted to make their advances in. That's why Ukraine says that Russia might do this. That would be the only advantage Russia might have. But yeah, and this again, this is another little piece here. Yeah, his intelligence agency is called GERV. Yeah, that's Ukrainian military intelligence. That's what Budanov is over. Now, he's further warned this. He has said that Russia is evacuating their people and gave them a mandate to be out of the plant by the 5th of July, which is a few days from now. So if he's true, this stuff could get ugly in a matter of days. I said, if Russians have counteracted that, claiming it was ridiculous. They said they're not going to do such a thing. So there's Andrei Nordkin. He's an anchor on the Russian state TVs, which means what he says is official Russian sanctioned stuff that he's saying. Anyway, he was talking about how the Ukrainians are stocking up on iodine. So the Russians are expecting something to happen, according to this guy, but they expect the Ukrainians to do this. Each side is expecting something to happen. They're going to blame the other. Now, could that be just if natural events occur that each going to blame the other? Well, yeah, that could be the case too. But anyway, he suggested that the claims coincide with that NATO meeting in Vilnius, Lithuania, on the 11th of July. And here's what he said. I'm going to quote him here. He said, they are screaming the Russians want to blow it up. Then they will do something over there. So that's what he's saying. They're going to do something in order to blame it on Russia. Russians are saying that, and the Ukrainians are saying that Russia is going to do it. So each side is blaming the other. Now, this would contaminate a good bit of Russia. It would contaminate first and foremost the Russian held oblast in Ukraine. So would the Russians really do it? Somebody's going to do it. They got to have a higher objective in terms of overall strategy for the war they're trying to prosecute, which means they don't give a hoot about the people in the area or the greater health of people within Europe and the world. I don't know, guys, or maybe they just all want World War III. This is nuts. Either way it goes, it's nuts that nothing's being done. This is a cooling pool right here. This is from an American plant, by the way. And what you see, that blueness in the water is from the radiation for the water. This is a cooling pool. This is not a reactor. This is a cooling pool, not a reactor. The cooling pool, you see, has a lot more rods than a reactor can hold, a lot more. Cooling pools are far bigger. It takes years, up to 5 years, before they could dry cast this. The typical is like 10 years. So, and I think in Zaporizhzhia, they actually have these a lot lower rods in these pools. So let me show you some more. This is a pellet right here. What the guy's holding his fingers is a uranium pellet. These pellets are strung together into a rod when they're clad with zircaloy. Zircaloy is a zirconium alloy. They don't use steel and other metals because the radiation would embrittle them and they would fall apart. They would actually break and crack and eventually fall apart. Zircaloy is one metal alloy that can withstand the radiation. The problem with zircaloy, now if you had a chunk of zircaloy sitting on your desk, you wouldn't have to worry about it unless your house caught on fire. But when it's hot, when it's got these radioactive fuel pellets inside of it, on contact with air, it will burn absolutely. And here is the proof. This is the ignition test conducted at the Sandia National Laboratories of these fuel rods, and you can see they burnt slap up. You see the guys here are standing. They didn't have the fuel pellets in them. They just put heat in them, and they had them in the air, and they burnt slap up into just dust. They burnt up. My friends, when I'm telling you this, I've got 2 reports on this from Sandia National Laboratories. The entire reports, you probably won't see them. They're very scientific and very detailed. But this is it in a nutshell. This picture tells the whole story. What you need to know is simple. When these hot rods, like a car, right, get on contact with air, they burn. And the problem with them burning is they contain uranium. And that uranium will partially burn with them and go up in dust. Some of it will fall into the bottom of the pool, and of course it will evaporate all the water out, and they will pull together into a slag that's going to continue to emit radiation for years to come, vast amounts of radiation, because it will be a hot molten slag. Who knows? It might go critical once enough slag gets together and get enough highly enriched uranium. I doubt if it's that rich. I don't think it would go critical, but I won't say that it couldn't. I doubt it, though. I think it's just going to emit tons of radiation. This is a cutaway view of the fuel rod cycle, guys. So basically, this is the reactor. They have cranes and stuff to move these rods in and out and then take them over to these cooling pools. The reactor is in this big, enormous containment building, so if things go wrong, it's supposed to not release the radiation. Of course, at Fukushima, we found out that hydrogen gas built up in here and caused the thing to explode. Well, like a miniature nuclear explosion. I don't think that's going to happen since these reactors have been cooled down somewhat, except Unit 4. Unit 4 might still be at some risk. Or if they got explosives inside the containment building or next to it, you might have a problem, especially if they're inside of it. But these cooling pools are typically just covered in a sheet metal roof at best. That's all you're going to have over a building like that. I'll show you some of that here in a minute. So here we are, back to the Zaporizhzhia plant. This is the cooling pools themselves. They're totally outside, completely outside. And they're so hot, they have this plant's been running for almost 40 years. This plant has been running for, I believe, 38 years to be exact. It has 6 reactors. These pools have an enormous amount of these cooling rods in them. And they're so hot, they're actually spraying water active. You can see here, water nozzles spraying water on them to cool the water down before it hits the pool. That's how hot it is. A typical pool, like the one I showed you up here, that's so radioactive, that's glowing blue. Now, it's 20 foot of water in here. It's okay to stand over it for some little period of time, like this guy right here, because that water, 20 foot of water, is going to stop the radiation. That radiation is hitting the water molecules and causing them to emit light. That 20 foot of water is a great radiation shield. It's also a buffer for cooling. In case something goes down, it's got to evaporate that water. But a pool like this would evaporate 160 gallons a minute. Pools like this, where they're double stacked, there's actually far more radiation in these. There's probably far less water covering them. And being double stacked, they will probably melt down faster there. I mean, in terms of evaporating the water. If they got to spray water on them to keep them cool, that means these pools are already really hot and would evaporate really fast if something went wrong there. And this, I suppose this is what they're saying the Russians have mined as these, although they could be talking about this guy here, the bank center, maybe both. I don't know what the claims are, but this pool is critical because this is where these pools draw their water, and they have to draw it very actively. So it takes electrical power to run all that, my friends. Takes electrical power in a total grid down situation, you got a problem with that. And I've talked about that in other videos. So just understand what we're dealing with here. That would be like if your hydrogen explosions went off. That don't look too different than what happened at Fukushima. It was not a nuclear explosion. I do not expect any nuclear explosions at this plant, but I won't say with absolute certainty they won't happen. I would say probably 98% not. But you could have hydrogen explosions maybe out of reactor 4. I doubt it. But what you will have is something that's worse than what that picture looks like, except it won't look as bad. It would be the radiation. The radiation is going to be clear, colorless. Smoke might have some color to it, but it's going to be deadlier than this. This just evokes the idea of danger, but the real danger is something you can't even see. Now, this is a map that somebody put together claiming this is the radiation profile for what would happen at some point after this plant was to go into meltdown there, or the spent fuel rod pools went up. I don't know what all the assumptions are in this drawing, but this drawing, I got some issues with this one. And I'll show you in the subsequent drawing here why I've got issues with this. One of them is, okay, you see the main concentration near Zaporizhzhia. Indeed, the heavier elements will fall out, like polonium and such, plutonium. They will fall out. Strontium should fall out pretty closer too. Strontium-90 is very bad because it has an affinity for calcium, which means it can go inside your bone if you eat something that's contaminated with it, and it can irradiate you for the rest of your life from your inside out. There's nothing you can do if you get strontium-90 in your bones. You got a problem. In any event, guys, this map shows radiation here. Then it shows a lot of radiation way over here with nothing in between. You see, I got an issue with it. You don't get from here to here without getting here and a lot of other stuff. So I don't know who drew this map, how they come up with this. I think it's nuts, but what they do show is NATO countries being covered with radiation, which is an issue. But this may be what it's going to look more like, because this is Chernobyl. Now, guys, I got to tell you, there's more spent fuel rods in those pools that can irradiate than what we got out of the reactor at Chernobyl. Chernobyl problem was not a spent fuel rod, it was a reactor itself. And they did get it contained. This was the radiation that actually leaked out. I do have a problem with this chart too, in that it does not give me, it says dose, multiples of normal rates, but it don't tell me what the rate, what the measurement unit is. You got so many unscientific people out there making charts. But this was the area that was irradiated by Chernobyl. And this darker area was really some serious radiation right here. So, and they got an exclusion zone still that you're expected to stay out of around Chernobyl. Now here is Senator Richard Blumenthal and his wife, Senator Lindsey Graham. So, that's kind of a joke. I used to say Lindsey was, well, anyway, let's go, I'll skip that. So guys, these guys come together and they made a pact to say that if there is any radiation from Zaporizhzhia reaching NATO nations, it would be considered an Article 5 event and invoke the NATO treaty for war against Russia. Guys, if nothing's done, you're going to get radiation there. Those cooling rod pools have to have water in them. Let's go back up here, guys. When this will go dry, because it's not getting more water from the river. This reservoir is not there. The pumps that pump water in here had their inlets not far below the surface of this. They don't reach the water anymore. There is no pump set up at the moment to pump water into here. This is the reservoir that keeps these cool. This is the reservoir that they said would give them 2 months of backup. This is a cooling pond. This is the big cooling pond. So guys, there is a real issue here. And that now there is, like I said, a little channel of water right here. If they can get over here and get new pipes run and new pumping gear established, my friend Lee Wilbarger came up with a scenario for the tractors and the hoses, and he found the right materials, and he called the folks up at Ukraine so they could do that. That is, if they get over here. Right now, this is under Russian occupation. So if the Russians would do it, but they haven't done it yet, maybe they can't even get out here because this may be a fire zone. If they get out here and try to put all this stuff in, they might get attacked. And Ukrainians can't get over there right now either. They need to make a truce on this. It seems like each side, at least one of the sides, might be interested in having this event occur, just so that, and Ukraine might, just so they can get inside of NATO. And according to Ukrainians, Russians will like to see it happen if their counteroffensive makes progress, so that they would have to stop and deal with evacuating people and have issues crossing the radioactive areas. Now, when I was in the Army, we trained to cross radioactive fields. That's what we train to put sandbags on the bottom of your vehicles and just drive across it. Our military had operations to training to operate in a nuclear environment. We were told that if we had a war, we would go in. Guys, now here is Fukushima. After Fukushima bust, they had the reactor down here, and the cooling pool was on a level above the reactor. And they had a sheet metal roof. You can see the sheet metal roofs blew off, burned up, whatever the case was. And these reactor rods were exposed. They were able, now you can see a crane here pumping water. That's what this thing is pumping water into those cooling pools. This is pumping water into the cooling pool. So they were able to get fire trucks, and he's got a hose running here. They got to be able to put 160 gallons a minute in there, or maybe more, depending on how many cooling pools are sitting on top of this reactor, probably one. So that's probably adequate right there, and it did. They were able to keep it, but they didn't lose the entire grid. They weren't in a war, so they were able to get assets there and do it. Now, the problem in Ukraine is they got a war going on, and there is power issues, and and they don't have the big tanker trucks in Russia, and in water tanker trucks, like fire trucks. They aren't as big in Russia and Ukraine like the United States and Europe has, or at least lots of Europe. The whole time I was in Moscow, which was a week, I never saw one semi truck. All their trucks are like 2-ton trucks and things like that, 2.5 tons. So guys, again, this is another view of Fukushima, just to give you some idea of things that already happened, stuff that happened that couldn't happen. Oh, this will never happen. and it did. Now, this is the backup generators that we have to be able to maintain. This guy's pointing toward a filter on it. Yeah, what happens when the grid goes down and we can't get spare parts to keep these running? What happens if these generators themselves get fried by an MP, as some sources think can happen here in this country? We'll go more into that. Yeah, let's look at this for a little bit. We're going to look at what it means here in the United States. For one, the overall, these guys are saying, gosh, if we get radiation in Europe, we're going to war. That is an issue. And it might be what's going to happen because NATO people have talked the same language. So let's think about this just for a little minute here in the United States. This is some of the nuclear power, spent fuel rod storage sites in the United States right here. That's what this is a picture of. This is a picture of where the reactors are with the exclusion zones around them of 50 miles circles around each plant. So that's where they expect the most intense radiation. As you might remember, when Fukushima occurred, we actually had radiation here in the United States, cesium-137. Now, this picture was, this is depicting the radiation dose in Europe back in 3 May 1986. I'm going to explain radiation to you guys a little bit here, at least the levels, the dosages. I've got a surviving nuclear war videos where I go into more details about this stuff. So if you want to know what's at these plants, now this chart was good as of almost 10 years ago, 2015. In 2015, we were at about 100% capacity on our fuel rod pools, and we're generating 2,000 metric tons of highly radioactive waste each year. So I'm going to give you an idea of the magnitude of this problem. Now, they can dry casket after it's been 5 to 10 years. They dry casket. I think they have sped it up in some cases, done it in 3 years. But guys, the process of dry casking those rods is very detailed. I've had a person that does that tell me that they can only do about 4 rods at a time. That's not even fuel assemblies apparently. And they have to do underwater welding. It takes very highly specialized teams on a lot of specialized equipment, highly trained people to do this task. Are those people available over there in the war zone? We know a lot of the people that maintain the plant, a lot of the Ukrainian plant operators have left, some under duress. And, the Russian troops are not going to have this kind of training. Now, in Russia, there are people that know how to deal with nuclear power plants. Are they on site? Who is there? Or do they have that kind of training? Do they know that plant in particular? That's very important. Every plant is different. But what you can see here is the volume of spent fuel rods grows faster than they're being cast right now. So we got a huge volume of spent fuel rods here in the United States. Now this goes back to 2020. So this is your total inventory up to here. So to give you some better concept for this, here's the prevalent winds in the United States. So you can think if you're downwind from one of these, you're going to get more of it than that 50-mile radius. Now, like I said, again, Fukushima, they got that stuff contained pretty fast and got those. We never had a problem with spent fuel rod pools at Fukushima. They got the cooling water on before there was an issue. They were worried about an earthquake breaking or cracking them and spilling them out. Fortunately, that's not happened. So that problem, the biggest problem there is they got so much water, radioactive water, they don't know what to do with it. They're about to release it into the Pacific Ocean. So get your red sockeye salmon now, wild caught stuff, which is the best, because once there's radiation in the ocean, that stuff will get in the bones of the salmon. You don't want to eat salmon bones anymore when that stuff's in the water. So that's a prep tip. Get your red sockeye salmon, your pink salmon, get it all right now. All right, guys. So let me give you some examples here of comparison. Let's look at nuclear bombs. This is the little boy nuclear bomb that we dropped on Hiroshima, I believe. And this guy here had 141 pounds of enriched uranium in it. Now, typically, this was not this was like enriched on like it was not enriched beyond 80-something%. I don't think it wasn't that highly enriched. It's probably why they had to have more pounds than is typical in today's devices. This is our first atom bomb. Nuclear bombs today usually only have 2 to 25 kilograms of plutonium. 2 to 2.5 kilograms. That's 4 to 5 pounds. as opposed to 141 pounds. But I'm going to use this 141 pound number as an analogy, because I also wasn't fully enriched. So, yeah, here I'm talking about the zircaloy fuel rods. All right, guys, 85 metric tons. That's how much stored fuel there was just as of a few years ago. It's not even accurate today. And I said, Russia and U.S. have roughly 14, both together, 14,600 nuclear weapons. Now, I'm assuming here that you had 141 pounds per of nuclear material per weapon, per warhead. We know that's not the case. Those warheads are smaller. But I'm using the worst case scenario, because if you take that and divide it, what you come out to is if you divide this into this, you got over 91 times more in the United States, 91 times more hot nuclear material stored than there is in all the nuclear warheads on Earth, just sitting around in our backyards waiting for the power to go out to go up in smoke. So yeah, some of the stuff that we need to get the dry casking and stuff as soon as possible. We need backup means to make sure, besides those generators, which won't be able to get fuel or spare parts once the grid goes down. They may even be taken out by the EMP itself. So we got a bad system. We need to have like these micro nukes or something as backup power for the power plant. We got to have something different than what we have today. But see, this also talks to Zaporizhzhia. Zaporizhzhia probably has, in its own accord, more nuclear material in those pools than all the warheads in the world. Warheads are small, they're tiny. There's a few thousand of them. Those huge pools are full of tons of nuclear material. And like I said, I used 141 number here. It really should have been like the number used should have been like 5 or 6. When I calculated this other, it was hundreds of times. But I backed off because I thought that was looking too scary. But the truth is, there may be hundreds of times more radioactive material in the spent fuel rod, because I'm not talking about the reactors. I'm not even discussing the reactors. I'm assuming you're going to safe the reactors. That may not be a good assumption, because everybody always concentrates on the reactors. The reactors are nothing compared to what's in the spent fuel rod pools. Nothing compared to them. Everybody concentrates on the reactors. The eyeball is on the wrong spot. Now, yeah, you should be concerned with the reactors. But when it comes to this kind of scenario, which is not what people typically worry about, because they, oh, we got power, we'll take care of this. No, when your stuff goes down, that's an issue. And with Zaporizhzhia, this can be an issue. That's why I put it out there, guys. So let's talk about radiation for a little bit. You know, when you first get irradiated, you're not going to feel a thing. It's all fine and dandy, but then you start getting sick, guys. So rhodogen. Now, there's so many units of radiation, it's confusing. It is easy to get confused. What's what? I don't understand it. This chart talks rads and rhodogens. My device measures in sieverts or whatever your device measures in. See, I got a radiation monitor here. So, and there's also dosimeters. There's different things. I got dosimeters. That's what you absorb yourself. So rhodogen is the measure of radiation in the air caused by gamma rays in a cubic centimeter of air. This is how much radiation is there. A rad is how much can get absorbed, because different materials absorb different radiations or radiations at different rates. You know, some are more absorptive than others. So a rad is a radiation absorbed dose. This is what you look at with a dosimeter, rads or REMs. So the rad is what you take inside. I talk about this more in my other video on nuclear survival. I'll go more detail on this stuff, guys. But a REM is health equivalent to a human being. It's a rhodogen equivalent man. But typically, as this says, 1 rad of exposure equals 1 REM of dose, typically. But there's a quality factor that can be brought in case that there's differences in what they expect. But typically, that is it. Now, there's other international units used, like the sievert, the gray. 1 sievert is 100 REMs. 1 sievert is 100 REMs. I'm going to show you charts that look at the radiation exposure effects for both sieverts and REMs or rads. Okay, guys, so that's where we're going. All right, this is a big chart. I'm going to break it down where it's a little easier to look at. We all get radiation all the time. Just sleeping next to somebody, it gives you 0.05 microsieverts. Now, microsievert is a millionth of a sievert, by the way. So that's So you can tell your lover that she's radiating you. She's radioactive, or he's radioactive. But living within 50 miles of a nuclear power plant, which I do, this is what you get, about 0.09 microsieverts, which is a little bit less than eating a banana, which is 0.1 microsievert. Now, again, a microsievert is 1/millionth of a sievert. Living within 50 miles of a coal power plant, though, because they have radioactive carbon-14, gives you approximately 0.3 microsieverts. Now, see, this one is the sleeping with somebody dot. So that's what that is equivalent to all the way through here, guys. An arm X-ray, you'll get 1 microsievert from an arm X-ray. Using a CRT monitor, if you all remember the big old thick monitors we used to have, the old televisions had a cathode ray tube for a year, would give you 1 microsievert, like an arm X-ray. All right, extra dose from spending 1 day in an area of higher altitude, like the Colorado Plateau or my place out of Show Low. This is what you get. It's 1.2 microsieverts. Now they take that unit and multiply it by 4 to basically show you what you get with a dental X-ray, which is 5 microsieverts. Background dose received by the average person over a normal year, over a normal total year, you're going to just get, just going through life, 10 microsieverts. Now that still isn't that much. An airplane flight from New York to LA, 40 microsieverts. Now if you take all of this, it will make these 3 dots here. And one of these dots is a chest X-ray at 20 microsieverts, okay? So I'm not going to go through all of those, but what we're going to look at here is EPA yearly release limit for a nuclear power plant. While they will allow a nuclear power plant to emanate release, is 250 microsieverts. That's 1/4 of a millisievert. A millisievert is 1,000th of a sievert. All right. The yearly dose from natural potassium that's in your body, you can get 390 microsieverts. Mammogram, 400 microsieverts. EPA yearly limit on radiation exposure of a single member to the public is 1,000 microsieverts or 1 millisievert. Maximum external dose from 3 Mile Island was the same, okay? So I wonder if they took the dose from 3 Mile Island. Oh, we had this happen. Okay, well, let's adjust what people are able to expose to and make it that. So maybe that was their way of covering for this, saying it wasn't a problem, right? But still, these are lower level radiations. We're going to get into the scary stuff in a minute. Typical dose over 2 weeks at Fukushima exclusion zone is 1 millisievert. Since some people saw higher doses. A head scan from a CT, you can get 2 millisieverts. All right. Normal annual background radiation dose, we've covered that. Dose from spending an hour, just 1 hour on the grounds at Chernobyl. This is, as of 2010. They say it varies widely, but they said 6 millisieverts. A chest CT, 7 millisieverts. Maximum yearly dose permitted for U.S. radiation workers, 50 millisieverts. That is half of what might give you cancer. Well, that they know will give you cancer. We'll look at that here. So all of this that we just looked at becomes that, which becomes, see, these brown ones here. The 4 of them is the total dose at one station at the northwest of Fukushima, 40 millisieverts. Okay, this is what they allow for a worker to get is in a nuke plant. Radiation worker, anybody that works radiation, whether you're a dental hygienist or whatever, or a nuclear plant worker, you're allowed up to 50 millisieverts. But the lowest 1-year dose clearly linked to increased cancer risk is only twice that, clearly linked. That means that even this might give you a cancer risk. So what they allow, if you work in a nuclear power plant, you might have a higher incidence of cancer over time, but it's not clearly linked. But they can clearly link, if you get 100 millisieverts in a year, you are at risk to a cancer. That's 1/10 of a sievert. And a sievert is 100 rem, okay? So that's like 10 rem. All right. 10 rad. All right, so dose occurring symptoms of radiation poisoning. This is where you get the radiation poisoning. Now you're getting sick. You got issues. That is 400 millisieverts. It says it varies according to the person. So it's about 4 times what will give you cancer. So if you get a dose of 400 millisieverts, expect sickness. Severe radiation poisoning In some cases, fatal. You could die from this, but you can get clearly sick at 2 sieverts. 2 sieverts. All right, 2 sieverts. That's 200 rem. Usually fatal. This will usually kill you, but you might be treated if you get prompt treatment. 4 sieverts. Fatal dose, even if with treatment. There are some exceptions to this, but fatal dose, even with treatment, 8 sieverts. 8 sieverts. This is what will, you're a goner. You're practically goner over here at 4, but at 8, you might as well just make funeral arrangements, guys. Now, to look at it from rotogens, rems, whatever. So this is different units because everybody's got different meters and measure stuff differently. You hear it in different ways, so I'm covering it from both sides. 50 rotogens, rems, rad. The smallest dose detectable by an individual laboratory methods, that means most labs, 75 to 100 may cause transient nausea on day exposure with 10% of the people exposed. So this can cause some sickness. 200, largest dose that does not cause illness severe enough to require medical care. And most people, 90 to 95% of some would require it. 40, 150 will cause death in about 50% of the people exposed within 3 to 4 weeks. 450 cause death to 50% of people exposed in 3 to 4 weeks. 600 will cause death to almost everyone exposed in 2 to 3 weeks after exposure. Remember, I said 400 in the other chart was the limit for severe sickness. Right here, that's 400. Usually fatal. 800 they considered fatal. Over here they got 600 will cause death to almost everyone exposed in 2 to 3 weeks after exposure. So, this is a different cut at the apple. 600, you can expect to die. Over here they're really talking 800 or 8 sieverts. Now, for children, the effects can be half of those dose rates. 30 to 70 rem from 6 to 12 hours, another slight decrease of transient headache and nausea, vomiting, up to 5% of your personnel, kids in this case, in the upper part of the dose range. Mild depression within 24 hours, full recovery expected. Fetus damage from 50 above, yeah, all right. So fetuses are even more susceptible. So 70 to 150 from 2 to 20 hours, transient mild nausea, vomiting, and 5 to 30% of the personnel. Potential for delayed traumatic and surgical wound healing. Okay, this is actually for people. What they're saying here, this isn't kids. This is personnel. For children, you cut this number in half. So it's just another way of looking at it. Yeah, 150 to 300 from 2 to 3 hours, transient to moderate nausea and vomiting, 20 to 70% mild to moderate fatigue, and weakness, and 25 to 60% of personnel at 3 to 5 weeks. Medical care required for 10 to 50%. At the high end range, death may occur to a maximum of 10%. Anticipated medical problems, including infection, bleeding, and fever. Wounding or burns will geometrically increase morbidity and mortality because you might get other diseases in where you got the injury from it. So this is how it builds up. 800 plus, you're just in trouble, guys. See, this is the real danger zone. These last two, 300 to 550 rems or rads, really rems in this case. From 2 hours to 3 days, transient to moderate nausea and vomiting, 50 to 90%. Most people are going to get sick. Mild to moderate fatigability, and 50 to 90% of personnel. At 2 to 5 weeks, medical care required for 10 to 80%. Most people are going to need medical care. At the low end range, less than 10% deaths. That's at the low end of the radiation range. The higher end is worse. Problems include frequent diarrhea, stools, anorexia, so you're going to lose weight because you can't eat. Increased fluid loss, ulceration, new ulcers, increased infections and susceptibility during an immunocompromised time frame. Your immune system is compromised. You're easier to catch bugs. Moderate severe loss of lymphocytes, hair loss after 14 days. That's have your hair coming out. A lot of people are getting radiation treatment for cancer. It's amazing you get treatment of something for cancer that can cause cancer. Anyway, from 2 hours to 2 days at 550 to 830, and here you're probably going to die. From 2 hours to 2 days, moderate to severe nausea and vomiting, up to 80 to 100% of personnel. Almost everybody's going to get sick. and that's 2 hours to 2 days. From 2 hours to 6 weeks, moderate to severe fatigability and weakness in 90 to 100% of the person. Almost everybody's going to get sick a little bit further out. At 10 days to 5 weeks, medical care required for 50 to 100%. At the low end of the range, death may occur more than 50% at 6 weeks. At the high end of the range, low end means like 550, high end is like on 800 side. At the high end, death may occur for 99% of personnel. Over here, you're expected, you ain't going to make it. 99%. Remember what I showed you? 8 sieverts was considered fatal. Well, this is 8 sieverts, even 6 sieverts. Remember, 6 sieverts is right in the middle. 6 sieverts just barely above 530. Anticipated medical problems include developing pathogenic opportunistic infections because your immune system's gone. Bleeding, fever, loss of appetite, GI ulcerations, that's your entire intestinal tract getting ulcerated. Bloody diarrhea, severe fluid and electrolyte shifts, capillary leak, that's your blood veins. Hypotension, combined with any significant trauma, survival rates will approach 0. 830 plus, from 30 minutes to 2 days. Don't forget the 2 hours to 2 days. 30 minutes to 2 days, severe nausea, vomiting, fatigability, weakness, dizziness, disorientation, moderate severe fluid imbalance, headache, bone marrow, total depletion within days. That's what makes you red blood cells. You're not going to have any more blood. CNS symptoms are predominant at higher radiation levels. Few, if any, survivors, even with aggressive and immediate medical attention. This is your fatal zone, guys. This is one of the stuff is we got to pay attention to it. Stop sharing. Halo. All right, guys. So the bottom line is this is serious. You can expect a lot of radiation because there's so much radioactive material in those coolant pools. And what it will do is that water level evaporates and it starts to expose, and it'll start burning where they're exposed. And that'll cause the water to evaporate faster, and it'll just go down and just burn them up as the water evaporates. And what's going to be left is for the aluminum that don't get caught up and burn because it's molten and getting spluttered out and going up with the zirconium. What pit uranium don't burn will pool at the bottom of the plants. Well, there's a lot of other radioactive materials in there too, strontium, plutonium. It will pool at the bottom of the plant, and at the bottom of the pool, which will be dry at this point, and it will just irradiate. The whole area will be extremely contaminated. You won't be able to get personnel in there to do anything. It's going to be beyond human fatality. How Chernobyl was stopped was there were helicopter pilots who carried buckets of concrete to dump on the reactor. Those pilots knew they were going to die. They knew they were on a suicide mission. He who lays his life, there's no greater love than he who lays his life down for a friend. Several of those pilots, they were Russian, by the way, they sacrificed their lives for the sake of the world. What's going to happen here? A helicopter carrying little concrete buckets is not going to be able to fill up those big coolant pools. That's a lot bigger than the reactor at Chernobyl. This is a much bigger problem. What's got to be done is somebody's got to get in there and make sure they can draw water out of the Dnieper River proper. Now, some of those channels and tributaries where that river's right up where it was, to try to get water to keep those pools cool. If they can keep that big pool cool in water, then the whole system can continue to work. But it is a war zone, and nobody's done it yet. And now, how many weeks has it been since the dam went? It's been a few weeks, so it's ticking. If nobody does anything, it's going to be an ugly picture. And then the prospects for war, the blames, the counter blames will go up. Is somebody going to blow the place? Is the Russians going to blow it? Are the Ukrainians going to blow it? I hope neither. What do you think? But according to the Russians, the Ukrainians will do it to get in NATO. They'll want to have it. And the Ukrainians have said that the Russians are trying to evacuate by the 5th, which is conveniently just before the NATO meeting on the 11th and 12th. I said before on here that NATO meeting in Vilnius is going to be a watershed event for what might unfold into a full world war with Russia, because Russia's red line, what Russia got into this all about was to keep Ukraine from going into NATO. So buckle up, guys. I'm not saying those things are going to happen. Maybe somebody will get in there and make sure that water can go to those rods. That's what it takes. That and no explosions. If they can do that, they can keep it safe. If the question is, will it happen. If it don't happen, this is absolutely going to go bad. So don't come in here and tell me, nothing's going to happen. I've seen that comment too many times. Yeah, unless something does happen, something will happen. Anyway, guys, hope, prep, and pray. That's all I can say. With that, I'm going to say thank you for watching, and Greg out.